What is up, guys? Rick Smackus here. Thank you so much for stopping by, and today we are going to be taking a look at a really interesting, really powerful weapon. Normally, I showcase weapons that people are often overlooking, that I think are more powerful than they're being given credit for. This time, that's not really the case. I have seen so many people post their rolls of this weapon. So many people have an interest in this brand new weapon that came to Destiny 2 with Season of the Worthy. But is it all that it's cracked up to be? Well, let's take a look. Now, the weapon here is the Interference 6 grenade launcher. Now, this is an old school New Monarchy weapon that has been reintroduced, and it's available to get in the random world drop loot pool. So anytime you get a legendary engram, you have the chance to get this weapon. And it has some incredibly powerful rolls. But more importantly than that, this is an adaptive frame grenade launcher. And this matters quite a bit when we're talking about the new best grenade launcher for damaging bosses, because previously to Season of the Worthy, grenade launchers were near the top of the PvE meta, specifically aggressive frame archetype. Stuff like the Swarm of the Raven, stuff like the Love and Death were often used in raid boss encounters, but of course could be used in strikes, menagerie, reckoning, whatever. They outputted a significant amount of damage really fast. But with Season of the Worthy, grenade launchers, and specifically aggressive frames, did get nerfed. Here is the patch notes. Essentially what happened is grenade launchers were nerfed across the board by 10%, so that's an unfortunate thing for grenade launcher lovers, but also with aggressive frames, they were actually doing exactly the same amount of damage as adaptive frames, but they shot faster. And if you're wondering, how does that balancing make any sense? You're not alone. In any event, after Season of the Worthy, the aggressive frame archetype went away. Like all of those grenade launchers, they don't say aggressive frame, now they say rapid fire frame. And this is going to give them a tiny bit more reserves as a benefit, but also it means that they're going to get a significant damage nerf to account for their faster rate of fire. So they're no longer doing as much damage as adaptive frames. Now, as you can see, they're doing 0.8 the damage, aka a 20% damage nerf. So if those are off the table, adaptives are the next best thing. They're almost shooting as fast, and they only have that 10% across the board nerf. They didn't get the 20% damage nerf that this stuff like the Swarm of the Raven got. So, the question a lot of people have had is, well, does that make adaptive frame grenade launchers the new best in slot when it comes to damage output? Let's find out. Firstly, we have an old school top tier grenade launcher. This is my Love and Death 1002 power, and importantly, it comes with the key factors in a damage outputting grenade launcher. Mainly spike grenades for more damage on a direct impact, so just more damage output, and then full court. This was introduced back with Season of the Drifter, but the Love and Death from Shadow Keep was the first time it was available on a then aggressive frame grenade launcher, and what it does is increase the explosion damage based on how far you are from the target, because every time you hit an enemy with a grenade launcher, there's actually two damages. There's a direct impact damage, and then there's a blast radius damage. Of course, if you miss them and hit beside, it's just the blast radius damage. And you can see that working right here. When I shoot this ogre close range, I do 9,784 damage, that's the blast radius damage, and then 5,064 damage, which is the direct impact damage. As I move further and further back, you can see I'm always doing that 5,064 for direct impact, but my explosion damage is increasing, and I can really back up pretty far here and get it all the way to 12,000 damage kind of through this door here. In any event, what I'm going to do is stand on this platform right here for all of my tests, and I'm going to shoot 5 rounds at this ogre. As you can see, it gets it to almost that final bar, and if you're wondering, okay, how much actual DPS is that? Well, I did the calculation. So at this range, it's the 5,064 impact, 10,237 splash damage for 15,000 damage total per shot. And that equates to, with 150 rounds per minute, 38,245 damage per second. Literally damage per second. The fact that you were able to do 30% more than that pre-patch is pretty insane. In any event, let's take a look at the new boy on the block. So I have this interference right here with, of course, spike grenades. That is key. And I've also got full court. So it's got those increases to damage output. So when we shoot the ogre up close, I'm doing 5,091 direct impact damage, barely any more, but then I'm doing 13,000 damage for the blast radius, so that's quite a bit more. And if I back up, I can get it like all the way to 16,313 damage. Okay, so I'm gonna go back to the exact same platform I was before, so same distance to the enemy. I'm gonna just lay into this guy. As you can see, the 5 shots are gonna do quite a bit more damage. In fact, basically with 4 shots, I'm doing the same as 5 shots from the now rapid fire frame Love and Death, which kind of makes sense. That would be around a 20% nerf in damage. But what does that equate to in terms of damage per second? Well, 5,091 impact, 13,866 splash is 18,957 total damage per shot from this distance, and that equates to 37,914 damage per second. So actually a tiny bit, we're talking a couple hundred damage behind the Love and Death in terms of damage per second. So I mean, there you have it. The Love and Death is better. Y'all just been clickbaited like when a new exotic comes out and everyone calls it the best, but it's not actually. Or is there more to this? Well, I actually did also test the DPS when it comes to the furthest damage. I thought perhaps because the individual grenade launchers do more damage for the adaptive frame, they would scale higher because of full court, but even with the maximum explosion radius that I could test for, it still was just a few hundred behind the rapid fire frame grenade launchers. And normally this would be kind of the end of the story. But there is a brand new perk called Clown Cartridge, and it's only spawning on the interference in terms of grenade launchers, and it throws these tests for a loop. Now, these DPS values are only applied when you're shooting at your max rate of fire. As soon as you run out of ammo and have to reload, they are going to tank. And that's where Clown Cartridge really comes into effect. This perk states that it randomly overflows the magazine from reserves upon a reload. Now, what this does for the interference, because luckily I do have one with spike grenades and full court and Clown Cartridge, is that it gives you quite a bit more ammo in a magazine. You can see I'm just constantly with Clown Cartridge shooting and reloading to see how much ammo I get, and most commonly I'm going to get 7 or 8 rounds. I think one time I got 6 rounds. So that's pretty significant. That means that when the Love and Death is reloading after 5 rounds, you are still shooting potentially 3 more rounds up to 8 with the interference. And in those scenarios, the interference DPS will blow past the Love and Death DPS. Now here's the thing, you can actually get the Love and Death up to 7 rounds in a magazine, but what you're going to have to do is replace the boss spec, which is going to add an extra around 8% increase in damage with a backup mag, a mod. And that will get the magazine to be more in line with the Clown Cartridge magazine, but that also means that if you tank the damage by 8%, they were only a couple of hundred off, remember? So that means the Love and Death is again way behind the interference. So what you're able to do is you're able to use boss spec with the interference, and if you have Clown Cartridge, you're able to get basically the benefit of also putting on a backup mag on the rapid fire frames. And if you're wondering what happens when you combine a backup mag with Clown Cartridge, we're looking at stuff like 11 rounds in a magazine, which is insane. That means that you're gonna have to reload twice with the Love and Death before you've ever reloaded with this thing with Clown Cartridge and Backup Meg. That is insane. And I think even with Boss Spec, that'll start negating the effect of Boss Spec just having to forego 2 whole reloads. However, this does mean that Clown Cartridge is essential when you're getting your absolute god roll interference. I actually got one first and I was so impressed I masterworked it, but it turns out that I got it with field prep, and yeah, this isn't going to be as good for damage output. Because we've already established that the rapid fires barely beat this weapon in terms of DPS, and I also have to use a backup mag to get to 7 rounds in a magazine, so I'm giving up on even more damage. Now this is still a very good weapon, and if you don't have a god roll rapid fire frame, specifically a god roll Love and Death, because without full court, then the interference is way better. If you're just sitting on a swarm of the Raven, like, you can replace it with an interference immediately as long as you get spike grenades and full court. Like, that is absolutely key, because a lot of this damage is coming from full court, honestly. But again, in terms of overall and raw damage output, you're going to get more benefit from having significantly more rounds in a magazine because of Clown Cartridge, still being able to use Boss Spec because of Clown Cartridge, and just rip through enemies in a pretty short period of time. The fact that this shoots a little bit slower is almost an advantage in some ways, just because it means that you're pretty unlikely to be affected by that loss of a couple of extra rounds in reserves because you're not using field prep, because the damage phase will probably be over well before then. In fact, it'll probably be over by the time you get like your 8 rounds off, honestly, in some scenarios. And therefore, after this testing, I'm confident in saying that an interference spawning with specifically spike grenades, Clown Cartridge, and full court is the best damage outputting grenade launcher in the game. However, I'm also confident in saying that your old school Love and Death, if it does spawn with spike grenades and importantly full court, is not very far behind, like really not very far. And if you're putting on as many reload mods as you possibly can, and you're in a well with Lunafaction boots and you can cut down that reload as much as possible so you can negate them and just focus on firing, I think it's pretty darn close, if not almost even, to the interference. But remember, the interference will also benefit from massively increased reload as well, but that's beside the point. So the interference is very, very good, but it's not that much better that it's like a must get. However, the last thing I do want to mention is that doing more damage per shot matters quite a bit when you're fighting anything other than bosses. Like majors, groups of enemies, all of that stuff, you want to just kill them with a single shot or do as much damage as you can with a single shot. And in those regards, the interference for like an everyday grenade launcher for a great part of your build is a really good choice and a pretty significant improvement over something like a Love and Death. Guys, that's it for the video. I hope you enjoyed, found this informative, and if you did, please remember to help me out by simply rating and especially sharing this video. If you guys want to see more Destiny 2 content similar to this, don't be afraid to slap that subscribe button. If you want to get in touch with me and keep up to date with the latest channel activity, the best way is to follow me on Twitter at @RickKackis. That's linked in the description down below. Again, I hope you enjoyed the video, and as always, have a good day.